So in thinking about the educational environment, I have three teenager type kids, and you had some experience politically in education. What what are we looking at now? I feel like I'm I look at the educational environment they're in, and I just think I feel like they're going to school and learning from people who have a political agenda to a large extent. And I think back, I was talking to some other friends that are of my age group, and I think back to when I went to school. I don't think teachers cared. They just wanted to get out of there.
Hmm.
It's what it felt like. Maybe I had a different view because I was a teenager, but where are we at educationally now? And what are these kids dealing with? And then what's the message we give these kids? And like they're the future thought leaders. They should be here, right? In 10 or 15 years. I don't know what to tell them anymore.
Yeah, I had a really great public school education, and I went back and forth between the public school system and the Catholic school system, and so I got to try out both types and all types of different learning environments. And I would say, on balance, I had an excellent education with some really inspiring teachers. And
Mhm.
I think all of us, yeah, will be able to look back on the teachers that made the biggest difference in our life. I think what's changed now is there's this critical theory that is coming through again in the universities, and it's being pushed down into the K to 12 education. And it's funny because I think those who are proponents of critical theory
Mhm.
expect you to just know what it is.
Right.
And most of us don't. You think critical theory, oh, that must be critical thinking.
Yeah.
And it's the exact opposite of it,
Mhm.
really. It's sort of, if I could describe it, it's this notion of looking at the entire world in terms of power hierarchies, and whether
Right.
you're part of the oppressor group or whether you're part of the victim group. And I just don't think that's a natural way for people to think of themselves in society. It's not a very healthy way to think of the people that you interact and interrelate with. And I think that's where the biggest battle is right now, is what is being taught in
Mhm.
social studies classes. Are we turning out kids who do have critical thinking ability, or are we turning out kids who are being inundated with a particular ideology and we're asking them to conform with it? I think that there's a real danger there, because if kids
Right.
don't have the experience, especially when they start getting into high school, of getting rewarded for exploring their own mind and
Yes.
exploring a variety of different opinions, then I don't know if that carries on into university. So we've
Mhm.
watched this big debate happening over the curriculum, and I think that that's at the heart of
Yeah.
the dispute, is that Premier Jason Kenney is trying to root out this kind of, I think, damaging
Mhm.
sort of philosophical and ideological teaching, so that we can get back to teaching kids the way we remember being taught when we were
Right.
kids. I don't know if he's going to win that one. That's the thing
Yeah.
that's I think doubly concerning for me, is that it has become so entrenched in the universities that you've got, I think you've got an academic um, mindset
Mhm.
and a whole variety of teachers that wouldn't know how to teach any other way. When I hear
Right.
parents tell me that they are coaching their kids to just write what the teacher wants them to
Yeah.
say,
You hear
just so
that a
they can
lot.
get a high grade,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not how it should be. It shouldn't be that way at all. So those kind of things, it took us 20 or 30 years to get here. It'll take 20 or 30 years to undo, but at least
Yeah.
now we know, at least it's now out in the open, so that we can have a conversation
It
about what the alternatives are.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a bit of you're starting to see the bubbling pushback on
Mhm.
on social media, where you see teacher blows up over school board trustees, and there's video clips of people exploding. Thomas Sowell talks about his thoughts on teachers, which they're kind of extreme, actually, like where he wants to break down educational institutions. And I think you're bang on. It's going to take a long time before we can figure it all out.
Or it could be happening very
Yeah.
quickly. I mean, look what happened over the last 15 months of COVID,
Mhm.
especially in some school jurisdictions where kids weren't allowed to go back into classrooms at all. I mean, we were at least fortunate that we've had delays in Alberta, but it hasn't been complete.
Right.
But you have a lot of parents who had to essentially teach their kids themselves, who had to make sure
Yes.
that they were in front of the computer and
Yeah.
make sure that they were doing their homework and give them coaching. And so when you have parents who see, if you're going to make me do all of this anyway, then
Yeah.
maybe I can be looking at other alternative models. Maybe I can homeschool my kids myself. Maybe I should be looking at sending them to a charter school. Maybe there's another way of doing this. And so that, in fact, I think, unfortunately for the Alberta Teachers Association, is that they almost made themselves non-essential by arguing so strongly against kids returning to school. Every parent I know thinks that having their kids in the classroom is an essential experience for them to have. But I think that the ATA diminished themselves by making it seem as though you could get the same kind of education online as you can in the classroom. And so for some kids, they can thrive in that environment. And so they may have actually permanently put us on a different track with parents. If parents don't feel like they're getting for their kids what they want to out of the existing system, now they know that they can have a different choice. So it could actually accelerate the change and getting back to something more balanced.
It's certainly a less homogenous educational system now, because there's so much at home, and people have had to make an awful lot of allowances for having to have kids at home. So it's been really interesting.
Well, and then go on to university as well. I mean, how many parents are happy with the thousands of dollars that they had to spend on their kids' education? Their kids didn't get in classroom training either. I mean, some universities were better than others, but you've probably heard the stories too of the class basically being, here's when your papers are due, here's when the final exam is, and here's a PowerPoint, walk yourself through it. I don't think that that's what people are paying $5,000 a semester for.
Yeah, Danielle, my son and I drove past Mount Royal the other day, and he goes, "That's where I go to university, but I've never been there."
Oh my gosh. See, that's the other problem, is that if you don't make yourself essential, then people find other alternatives. And it is so easy now to do micro credentialing and to take courses from anywhere around the world. Absolutely. I mean, I signed up to the a Great Books course, or Great Courses, I think is what it's called. And it's the very best academic professors in their area teaching you in 10 or 12 or 15 different segments, anything that you want to learn, whether it's microbiology or chemistry or American history. Like this is the thing, is that it's so easy now to get educated in any area with the very best professors, that it's going to have, each local institution is now going to have to make the value proposition. And I think they've eroded the ability to do that. And then on top of that, if they're training kids to be social justice warriors in a bizarre ideology that isn't particularly practical and is extremely divisive, then I think that is also going to hasten people looking towards different alternatives.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I have a political science minor. I had an economics major in political sciences, and it seemed more cut and dry then. And now it seems, like you said, it's very divisive, and you're not as much talking about different theories. You're talking about very specific theories, and it's interesting. And I have two kids in university now, and their education is it seems very linear. It doesn't have a lot of gray on either side. It's this is what we want you to know. This is what we're teaching you. Just know this. And then we'll test you on that, and that's it. It's interesting, and they don't have, like, when something comes up in the media, they don't have opinions that you can have a great conversation with them about the left and the right and the middle, and you can't have those conversations with them. They're very right here. They're right.
I'd always thought that, because I think conservatism has really faltered in the last decade or so. And I had often thought that the secret, because I'm a conservative libertarian, I believe in freedom first and foremost. I'd always felt like with young kids, they at least reflexively knew that their own personal civil liberties were important, that they wanted to be able to have their own freedom to say what they want and think what they want and do what they want. Kids were always the ones sort of pushing the envelope on issues involving, say, for instance, cannabis legalization as an example. And so I always felt like maybe the way to get young people to embrace free enterprise was to piggyback on their innate love of freedom And then you could talk about why free enterprise and economic liberty was important. Now the world's upside down. When you look at what happened with COVID, I'm astonished at how easily people were able to give up their freedoms.
Yes.
That there is this orthodoxy now that you cannot challenge. So free speech is gone. The notion that some things you're allowed to collect and gather for in assemblies, if it's a politically correct cause, and that's fine. But if you want to gather and oppose lockdowns, then you get the book thrown at you.
Yeah.
I thought we would respect freedom of religion. And in Alberta, there've been 3 pastors who have been jailed.
Yes.
So I feel like we don't really have a compass anymore. I thought that freedom would just be something people would so innately understand and value that they'd never let the government intrude in the private sphere the way they have. And yet here we are talking today, and it's still punishable by a $1,200 fine if I was to have my parents over for coffee or tea and have them into my house. And how did we get to this point where that became normal? So I don't know how you come back from this if there isn't because as I said, I begin from a foundation of valuing freedom. I read Ayn Rand when I was in my 20s, and her basic unit of society is the individual, and everything that goes to enhancing the individual's life is something that we should value. And yet we've moved more and more towards the collectivist approach, and more towards the group being more important than individual rights. And I don't know if now that we've gone this far down this path, how you get back that value of liberty and freedom and individualism. That's going to be a long road.